What's your mash bill? Is it 75% corn? Is it 65%
No, it's
corn?
70 to 80% corn.
All right, so that's a very high amount of corn. Then.
Well, but it's somewhere in between. Then the rest of the majority, the grain after that would be rye.
Okay.
We believe in rye.
So you stick to the tradition.
We love rye. And the whiskeys I've worked with over the years have always had a significant amount of rye. Wheat would be fine as a substitute. We actually made a 4-grain whiskey at Woodford, which had some wheat, but there's not a whole lot of difference between, let's say, 18% rye and 18% wheat. Mm-hmm. There's definitely not. Now, if you make a wheat whiskey, which is 51% wheat, there's going to be a big difference. Mm-hmm. But the important thing is that those little devils that you call yeast, that's probably the most important part of making the whiskey in the beginning, because that's going to generate all the fruitiness and all of the higher alcohols which make the body of the whiskey. Those yeast actually produce those things. So they're going to produce, if you go to different distilleries, you can smell either pear coming off the distillate, or peach, apple, all these different really neat flavors. Mm-hmm. So those flavors are green when they first come off the still, and then later on they become mature in the barrel. So there's all these things that are produced by that yeast, which is almost like magic. You can go to the distillery and you've cooked your corn and your rye, then you put the malted barley in, and so the malted barley actually converts the starch into sugar. So then you pump that to the fermenters. You may add a little bit of what we call stillage or sour mash to the fermentation. Then you add the yeast, which we have cultivated or had someone cultivate it for, specifically based on these different characteristics. Mm-hmm. I can have someone make a yeast that produces so much fruit flavor, a little fruit flavor, different types of fruit. And we had that done, and then the barrels would be 80%. The barrel plus maturation, time in the barrel, would be 80% of what makes a whiskey. And those barrels had to be produced specifically based on the toasting. Wait a minute, first of all, the air drying of the wood, how long you want the wood to be air dried. Mm-hmm. It could be 12 months, 24 months. That makes a lot of difference. And then the toasting, which is a proprietary process for the company that makes our barrels. It's actually the company I work for, and I designed that process, so nobody really cares.
Understand, we won't know more about that.
Yeah. Anyway, the toasting of the wood actually breaks down the lignin in the wood to produce the most beautiful aroma of vanilla. I mean, it's actually a natural vanillin is what it's called, and then that interacts with the wood notes in the oak to smell like vanilla. Because vanilla, pure vanillin is not what you consider vanilla. So then there are also spicy things that are produced in the wood, like we call aldehydes, which you'll have, here's a good term to throw out at the cocktail parties, syringaldehyde. And acetaldehyde, and we talked about hydroxymethylfuran, which smells like cotton candy. And then the aldehydes you have, it's like cinnamon, clove. I mean, all these things actually take place in the wood. The bourbon that we have had made for us, and then we sample that bourbon on a regular basis. We look at the color, the taste, the aroma, and then we know what they taste like. So some may be more bold, some have more color, less color, more fruit, whatever. So we categorize those whiskeys. Then we have the empty port cask where we start filling. From one barrel, we'll fill that barrel, another barrel, and then we sample those. Once we put it in the port, we'll sample that whiskey so we have a composite. Then we monitor that whiskey over the month that it's the bourbon is in the port cask. So that's the only way you can determine when it's time to take it out of the barrel.
When you say we monitor, you really say that you go.
Yeah, I don't want people to know I taste that much because it's kind of complicated. But it's very easy to sample a barrel, and you add a little bit of water to it to cut it down to about 25% alcohol, and you do the nose and the gustatory. So you do the olfactory, That's a technical term. The
I'm
olfactory.
sure our viewers will get that.
Yeah, that's something you can use at a cocktail party.
You can tell this man has a lot of experience when it gets to cocktail parties. That's what they do over there.
Over
They just
there,
party.
Kentucky?
Yeah.
No, we do tailgating. So it's kind of, we're out there at the football games and doing the tailgating, and you're trying to explain the fine factors about bourbon whiskey, and who cares? But anyway.
Well, what about the maturation? To
Okay.
get back to serious matter. What about, where is it matured?
Okay, we
Is
have
it all the way up there in the rack house? Is
all the
it-
way. Yes, it is.
And then what?
Then what?
Well, then what for the port cask?
Oh, the port cask. That's the same way. Once we fill the port cask, so we put them up on the top
Okay.
of the warehouse. The top of the warehouse is probably about 30 degrees warmer than the bottom. So this is typical of bourbon warehouses in Kentucky. So what you have to do, if you're bottling a large brand that has, you get the whiskey in different floors, you have to put first, second, third, fourth, put those together. But with our whiskey, since it's a very small whiskey, we put it on the top floor.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to watch it, because if you leave it too long, it's going to become woody.
Okay.
And we don't want that.
Isn't there more evaporation that
Yes.
you'll share as well? when it's all the way up there?
Well, but we still keep more for ourselves, even though we're going to lose more on the top floor. But your maturation is much more directed, controlled, and typically in a shorter amount of time. You can do a lot of things with whiskey, but the level on the warehouses affects the whiskey so much. The first floor whiskey is going to look like, let's say, if you took Angel's Envy and added water to this whiskey and cut it in half, it's going to be like a pale straw color. That's what whiskey on the first floor looks like. Mm-hmm. And it's not mature at all. So you have to be very careful to pick whiskeys from different floors. But we put Angel's Envy on the top and just let her go.
So there will be more color extraction.
Well, not just more color, but a maturation. Because it's maturation depends on temperature. It depends on the oxygen coming into the barrel and interacting with the raw whiskey to create all these wonderful flavors. And believe me, if you don't do that, the whiskey is not going to be a good whiskey.
I believe you.
Yeah.
And you'd better believe him too. Now, will you tell us a bit about what's coming next? Because you know how we are. We love this, but we want to know what's coming next.
Yeah.
What's down the road?
You guys are nosy. That's what it is. The Brandy Library, it just, I mean, you want to know everything. Anyway, based on what I've done in the past, with things that I could work on throughout the world, working with the different types of distilleries in Canada and Scotland, Ireland, and Japan, I've seen a lot of things that really look great.
A question is burning my lips now.
Oh my gosh.
Well, let's just put out the
okay,
fire.
let's see if it.